everybody and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be working on an oil pastel drawing of a cake. My year 7s have recently been working on a Wayne Thiebaud project, so I thought I'd put together this video for them to show them how to use oil pastels and specifically the layering technique. I have just reached 200 subscribers, so if you have recently subscribed or if you've been one of my subscribers for a while, thank you so much for supporting me. If you're new to my channel, my name is Gemma. I create weekly art content, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out. Okay, so let's get straight into this oil pastel drawing. To get started with my oil pastel drawing, I'm going to lightly sketch out the shape of my cake, and I start with the ellipse at the top of the cake and then bring down 2 parallel sides. Then I'm going to draw out the bottom part of that cake, and then I'm going to add in a nice big slice that's been taken out of my cake. And I'm working on an angle to make sure that I have this looking realistic, because I want this to look like a 3D cake. I'm also going to be adding in my shadow because I want there to be a high contrast of shadow within my oil pastel work. And I also place in a background to ground the cake and add a cherry on top. I'm now adding some details to the center of my cake, so I'm following the same angle as the slice that has been taken out to show each of the different layers within the cake. And I'm also making sure that I leave space for my icing to make it look as realistic as possible, because I want there to be quite a lot of filling within the cake. And again, I'm just adding in my shadows for the inside part of the cake. Now onto the actual oil pastel part of the drawing. I'm just laying down some yellow ochre and some oranges to start off with, really lightly for now, on top of my grey toned paper. And on one edge I also add in some blues and green tones, very lightly again, and you can almost see the paper coming through those blues and those greens. And then I start to build up on top of this with my yellow ochre and really blend and layer those colours on top of one another. And I keep working in with my orange and my yellow ochre just to build up a really nice layer of colour on top of that cake. The blue and the green provide a really nice base colour for us to layer up on top of, and we get those tones coming through once we've finished all of the yellow ochre. Once I have added all of my yellow ochre and my orange, I'm then going to go in and add some highlights with a white oil pastel, and this will help blend everything together and just add a few highlights. I'm now going to be working on the icing within my cake, and I'm going to be using blues for this part of my cake because it's actually in the shade. So I don't really want to use any blacks within this section, but I would like to show some darker tones, so I'm going to use a dark blue in the areas that are the darkest. And then for the main part of the cake I'm going to use a lighter blue just to show that it's in the shade, and also a grey. And I'm going to blend these in, and then I'm going to go over the top of them with a white oil pastel to blend them all together. This will give us some highlights within these parts of the cake, but also it will show that this is in the shade. And later on in the cake you will see the other half, which is a lot lighter and brighter. Then I just use some red and burnt sienna within the piece to darken some of the areas of that dark shade within the icing. I'm now going to start working on the top of the cake, and I'm going to be using a mixture of my oranges and also my yellows, and I'm just lightly blocking in any areas that I want to use with my orange oil pastel, and then I'm going to be adding a very light yellow over the top. So this is my lemon yellow that I'm now using, and I'm adding that on the top, and then I'm also going to add in some of my white oil pastel onto the top of the cake also. Next up is the cherry, and I'm using a mixture of my reds, oranges and also blue. So again, I'm not using a black in here to show where those darkest shades are. I'm using a very dark blue. And then I repeat the same process on the other side of my cake using very light pressure of my oranges and yellows before blending that all together with a heavier pressure with my yellow ochre and my white. And I feel like this is a really good finish for the top of the cake. And then I add in the icing for each of the layers of the cake. And this time I'm actually going to be using the lighter colours, so the oranges and also reds. Unlike the opposite side where I used those dark blues and also those browns and reds. However, there is one area that is darker within this side of the cake, and as you can see there is a line that goes down the middle part of this, and this is where there is a slight shadow that's being cast by the opposite side of the cake, and I'm using a lighter blue and a grey to add these shadows into the cake. And then I also add a shadow down on the ground as well, using my blues and greens. And then I do actually add a very small amount of black into this shadow just to darken it ever so slightly. Once I've done this, I then start to build up the colour of the sponge cake, and I've put down a really light layer of lemon yellow, and then I build up over the top with a very light peach, and then blend those two colours together before then moving onto the side of my cake. Now this side of the cake is a lot darker than the first side that I coloured in, and I have put down a base of red and also green before going over that with my orange and my yellow ochre. And then on the outside of it I add a very dark red, and also I build up further tones of green within the piece before I then move over onto that shadow. And on the shadow I outline this with my blue and my green and also an orange to give it a little bit more depth, and also to make reference to Wayne Thiebaud, who uses this halation technique in his paintings. Then adds a mixture of blues within the shadow, and then I go over the top of that with a grey before then filling in the entire background. So I'm focusing on the top part of my background first with a very light layer of blue, and then I fill in the entire of the bottom half just with a white oil pastel. And as you can see, I've left some of the texture coming through from that paper because I think that the texture works really well against the cake that's a little bit more solid. And with my oil pastel, I have just used that on the side to cover a lot more ground in one go. So it's really good to use different parts of your oil pastel with your work. So to get a more precise finish, you could use a very sharp edge, but if you want to get quite a loose finish, like I have got here in the background, you could use it on the long side. And now I'm just blending all of that blue section together with my white oil pastel. So there you have it, that was my oil pastel drawing. Now I absolutely love using oil pastels, and I do really like the layering technique and the quality that it can give, especially when it is on a mid-tone paper like I used today. Now it's getting so cold in my garage because it's obviously winter here now, and I think I'm going to wrap up and head off. So if you have enjoyed today's video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure you also subscribe so you don't miss out on my video next week, and also leave me a comment in the comment section to let me know what cake or dessert you would draw with oil pastels. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next week. Bye guys.